From medieval chronicles, they were trained to face steel. They marched toward arrows, fire, and blood. They learned how to die. And yet, there was something medieval soldiers feared more than death itself. Not the blade, not the battlefield, not even defeat. They feared a prayer, a whispered sentence spoken in Latin, a chant murmured by monks, a curse disguised as devotion, because in the Middle Ages, prayer was not comfort alone. It was judgment, it was power, and sometimes it was a sentence worse than execution. This is the story of the prayer medieval soldiers feared more than death. To understand this fear, we must abandon the modern idea of death. For a medieval soldier, dying in battle was not the worst fate. In many cases, it was honorable, even desirable. What truly mattered was how one died, and in what spiritual state. The medieval world was governed by a single certainty: the soul would live forever. Heaven, hell, and purgatory were not metaphors. They were destinations, and the distance between salvation and damnation could be crossed in a single moment. A synod, a sacrament missed, a prayer denied. A soldier could survive a battle and still be lost forever. Another could fall under a sword and rise into eternal glory. This belief shaped everything, including fear. Among all fears that haunted medieval warriors, one stood above the rest: to die unshriven, to die without confession, without absolution, without the Church's blessing. Because such a death meant the soul would carry its sins unclean into eternity. No less rites, no forgiveness, no intercession, just judgment. And judgment, medieval theology taught, was merciless. Prayer was not passive in the Middle Ages. It was an active force. Words spoken in the name of God were believed to move heaven itself. They could bless armies or doom them. Monks prayed for kings. Priests prayed for victory. Nuns prayed for the dead. But there was another kind of prayer, one that did not ask for mercy, one that called down divine justice. This was the prayer medieval soldiers feared more than death: the prayer of excommunication. Excommunication was not merely a punishment, it was a spiritual execution. To be excommunicated meant being cut off from the body of Christ, cut off from the church, cut off from salvation. An excommunicated soul stood alone before God, without protection, without advocates, without hope. And when the sentence was pronounced, it was done through prayer. Excommunication was often performed publicly. Candles were extinguished, one by one. Bells were tolled in reverse. A priest recited words that sealed a soul's isolation. Let him be accursed in his going out and in his coming in. The prayer did not ask God to judge. It declared that judgment had already fallen. For soldiers, this was terror, because no matter how brave, how skilled, or how loyal, an excommunicated warrior was spiritually dead. If he died in battle, his soul was believed to fall directly into damnation. No martyrdom, no honor, no redemption. There were moments in medieval history when entire armies marched under spiritual threat. During conflicts between kings and popes, soldiers often found themselves caught between obedience and salvation. To fight for an excommunicated ruler meant risking one's soul. Some soldiers deserted, others refused to fight. Some prayed desperately for absolution before battle, because no sword could protect them from a cursed fate. Worse than excommunication was the interdict. An interdict suspended all sacraments in a region. Church bells fell silent. Mass was forbidden. Burials were denied. For soldiers, this meant death without rights. even if they were loyal Christians. The absence of prayer became the prayer itself, a silence heavier than any curse. A soldier could prepare for death. He could accept pain. He could face defeat, but spiritual abandonment, that was unbearable, because medieval faith taught that suffering on earth was temporary, hell was eternal, and prayer was the bridge between human weakness and divine mercy. To lose that bridge was to be lost forever. On the eve of battle, priests moved among soldiers, hearing confessions. Some soldiers confessed sins they had never spoken aloud. Others begged for forgiveness they feared they did not deserve. They knew tomorrow might bring death, and death without prayer was a fate worse than any wound. The fear was not irrational. Medieval theology placed enormous power in spoken words. God created the world through speech. Christ healed through command. The church bound and loosed souls through prayer. Words shaped eternity, and so soldiers listened carefully. They feared the wrong words spoken over them. They clung to the right ones. In Chronicles, we read of wounded men begging priests not for medicine, but for absolution. We read of knights dragging themselves toward chapels while bleeding, not to survive, but to die forgiven. This fear-shaped behavior. It enforced obedience. It strengthened church authority. It turned prayer into discipline. A soldier might disobey a king, but few dared defy a prayer that could condemn their soul. This was not mere superstition. It was a coherent worldview, a system where the spiritual and physical were inseparable, where prayer was law, where fear was not cowardice, but awareness of eternity. Today, we read these stories with distance. We no longer fear excommunication as eternal doom. Prayer has lost its judicial weight. But for medieval soldiers, the fear was real, and it was powerful. Steel rusts. Empires fall. Battles fade into dust, but words endure. The prayer medieval soldiers feared more than death reminds us of a world where belief shaped reality, where fear was spiritual, where courage meant more than facing blades, where death was not the end, but the beginning of judgment. They marched into battle with faith and fear intertwined. They knew how to die, but above all, they knew what it meant to die alone, without prayer, without mercy, without hope, and that was a fate worse than death. From medieval chronicles,